All right. I didn't even have to say like quiet down or. I've been out of the classroom for 18 months, I guess. So yeah, I miss it. But thanks for coming to the town hall meeting. Let me just start by saying, first of all, thank you to Beckman staff. I don't think we say thank you enough, and everything we do, we don't really appreciate until you work in the office how much is going on behind the scenes, and it's really incredible and hugely appreciated. It comes from all facets, from operations to business to every other aspect of administration. So thank you very much. It's hugely appreciated. And thanks for showing up, because I think we have some important things to talk about. The future of Beckman is really exciting and maybe scary at the same time. It doesn't have to be scary. My wife told me this morning we're getting ready to go to the UK for 10 days, and she's coming with me and traipsing around all over with me. And she said, I go, "Are you ready?" And she said, "Well, I'm excited and I'm scared at the same time." And she said, "But I learned those are cousins of one another," whatever that means. So being at Beckman, it's exciting and scary at the same time, I think. That's all right. It's better than not, right? 3 points. The big message that I want to leave you with is really on the first slide. And it's the 3 bullet points that are there. The first one is be here. And as you'll see, here means physically present here. Our leadership team sort of put forward this hypothesis that physical presence in collaboration is more important than virtual collaborations, and we get to live that out and see if we can test that hypothesis and validate it, hopefully, or refute it if it's not true. But I believe it is true, and so we value your time here, because we do think that if that hypothesis has any merit, what's behind it is that, it's those interactions face to face, driving new ideas that I think are what is at the heart of Beckman. And so we really are looking for commitment to the Beckman Institute. If you value the Beckman Institute in the same way that I do every day I walk in the door, and have since I've been here since 1995, I think we owe it to one another to be all in. And to the staff, I'm challenging you too, because to make this a place that everybody wants to be continues to depend on all the hard work that you've done and continue to do. So it goes out to every one of us that are seated here and listening on the taped broadcast. The second point I want to make today and leave you with will come near the end, and so it's important to bring it up front so you don't forget it. But you're going to see some projections about our financial stability going forward. And I'm going to be right up front with you and tell you I have been guilty of this, maybe to a degree like no other myself, where grants that could have run through the Beckman and qualified as being multidisciplinary and multi-PI and earning indirect costs for the Beckman Institute were run through someplace else. Why? Because I wasn't aware, because I wasn't mindful of the impact. And I want to tell you, as you'll look at the numbers and the projections and Kara's models going forward, we don't need to grow the pie. It's plenty big enough if we are mindful about where those grants are running through. And if we're not, then we're going to be challenged and we'll face some struggles. But if we don't, if we are mindful and we do run those grants through Beckman, we're going to have great fun and decisions making tough choices, but choices we'll have about how that money and those resources are best spent so that we can go forward. And so that really leaves us to the third point, and that going forward in a very successful way depends on every one of us. And it's us that are going to control the future of the Beckman Institute. The destiny is in our hands. And so with that, we'll get started. The mission statement is something that ignored and I took it for granted, like, and sort of not aware of it and what its value was. And it's been the operating mission statement for 30 years. It does have relevancy still, but we've decided that we're going to tweak it, and I'll show you what that is. And some of the key words: interdisciplinary, highest quality, transcending, crossing boundaries. Those are the things that really have made what Beckman is and leads to stories like the ones that you see here. And if you don't see your name and your story on this, well, please talk to Doris, or we're still collecting these. If you ride the elevator or see the electronic signs, you can capture some of them and vote up, right, Doris? Vote them up, and your favorite ones. We're looking to collect Beckman's 30 greatest stories of the last 30 years, and this is what we have so far, but there's many more that can come, and they can come from each of you if you don't see your story as being projected here. I think a nice way to get a snapshot of what the history of Beckman Institute is on this next slide. This is a slide that Stacy Olson with Dorothy Loudermilk and others put together, and it really begins with the triangle on the left. And pay attention to the words that are in that triangle, because the card that you were handed on the way in will have on the triangle side of that card some of the very same words, in fact, faded away sort of into our past, but what we're based on are the words intelligence, information systems, cognitive science, neuroscience, and so on and so forth. And then on that triangle, you'll see our current themes of today. And in many ways, the words that are captured on Ted Brown's original, this came out of the Beckman Foundation, the proposal to the Beckman Foundation, is still very much at the heart and soul of what goes on at the Beckman Institute. But now we have captured it in the three themes that are integrative imaging, which began in 2008, and then the longer themes, the longer running themes. What was molecular and electronic nanostructures has now been transformed, molecular science and engineering. And we merged in 2016 the human-computer intelligent interactions and biological intelligence into intelligent systems. We will and are, I suppose, housing the Cancer Center. I think R is accurate. It will be transformed in the basement in a way that will be shared lab space. We have initiatives, 21st century scientists, recognizing that the scientist of today faces a lot more challenges and issues that have to be dealt with, and we can be leaders in that area as well. And that really is the core of what we are at Beckman Institute. Let me tell you a little bit about how some of these changes came about. First of all, the new theme name. Our reviews have been a really powerful way to keep us fresh and focused, and recognizing that, for way too long, the molecular and electronic nanostructures was kind of a theme that didn't have the right name associated with it. I really want to thank Charles Schroeder and Narayan Aluru and others who have stepped up and really created what I think is a very exciting area that captures much more closely what we are in this particular dimension of our research. So the TCB group and the Autonomous Materials Systems group remains as part of it. We also have, led by Yang Zhang, the Computational Molecular Science group, and then Charles is leading the Molecular Design and Engineering. The last two, one is obviously computational and the other one is more experimental, and they interface very tightly, and they're located on the third floor. If you haven't visited them yet, go check them out. They've got a really nice, cool neighborhood to hang out in now. The other thing that came out of our reviews is really a reorganization led by Ji-Pei Liang and Steve Bopart to really rethink what integrative imaging was. And in 2016, October, we had a review, and it was really put to the task that, try to capture better what it is that you are and what you want to be going forward. And I won't read them to you, but the 5 themes that exist, there was 6, and our dynamic groups are there were 6 groups, that we now have 5. These groups are dynamic, and I think you can see we whittled one away. Right, Brad? Where's Brad? Because it really just wasn't quite relevant anymore, or it didn't seem to fit here better than it fits someplace else. But that leads me to the next slide. And one of the things in that original mission statement, which I didn't bother reading, was about how the boundaries are non-existent at Beckman Institute, but that hadn't really existed. To be honest with you, we put groups and we put people into very tightly defined places in our spreadsheets and whatnot. And a much better, messier, albeit, but it's okay, accurate picture of what Beckman is, I think, is captured by this slide. I threw the groups all into the middle of this Venn diagram, and we are some mashup of molecular science and engineering, integrative imaging, and intelligent systems. And it was impossible, in fact, as the Venn diagram was being drawn, to think about where those groups would be placed, but that's also not really what we are, right? We're trying to transcend boundaries and tear them down, and so I think this sort of messy inner Venn diagram pretty much does a great job of capturing the 18 groups that now exist in the 3 themes at Beckman. And the reason that we are the way we are, and I will say have the potential to be great, and the reason that we are the way we are, and I will say have the potential to be great, is because of the people that are here. And we are filled with faculty, almost 100 full and part-time faculty, that make up the Beckman Institute. And I think the most impressive thing about, and most exciting thing about being here is really the diversity that exists. Where else, anywhere, would you find the kind of diversity filled with departments whose ranks are among the top 10 in almost all cases? And I'll just pull out bioengineering and say, and you will be there soon, under Mark Anastasio's leadership, which Mark and I had a great conversation about. Wow, wouldn't it be nice to be the department head right now in bioengineering? Because by the time you're done, you're going to be one of those top 10 departments, and we will do everything we can to help make that happen. But what's in the text in the corner is something I'll return to, and it was the second bullet point, or maybe the first bullet point that I had on that opening slide. And we're successful because of the people that are here, and by here we really mean present in this building. And we are diluted easily today by many opportunities all across campus, but they become pretty meaningless and diluted if we're not, really committed to something. And so it's my charge once again to ask you to, decide if you want to be committed to Beckman or not. And what we want are committed people, because that's what's going to return us to greatness. And I used those words very specifically, as you'll see, the reasons why in just a moment. Return us to greatness. What we want to be and what we want to be known for is Vivash just walks in, one of our power collaborators, right, Vivash? It was actually at a director's seminar where he gave this amazing talk and really connected the tight interconnects between multiple groups. And I said I don't remember, I think I said at the beginning as I introduced you, here's one of our true power collaborators. And hopefully that is what we are known for, and that is what we become. So it's really a pleasure to serve this amazing group of faculty who really bring and teach. I mean, somebody might ask me why it is that I think I have the best job on campus. And the answer I would immediately give them is because there's never a day where I don't have an opportunity to learn something totally new. And it's all of you that can teach me that. Here's a timeline of what's been happening lately, and it starts back in May of this past year. In May, we had a really great retreat, which kicked off our strategic planning for the the banner that's shown on March 27th and through 29th coming up this coming spring. Every 5 years or so, we are on a cycle to have the Beckman Institute program-wide reviewed, and that's what's going to be happening on March 27th. To prepare for that, that was the kickoff strategy planning session that we began with our retreat back on May 15th. And it's been a great process, and it's been a process where we've really looked inward. We've asked external stakeholders what their views are of Beckman and where it's going and what it needs to do. And it's been really, I think, a great charge to work with Beckman leadership, meeting every other week and really strategizing about what it is that we want to do going forward. We've not done this on our own. In fact, I felt somewhat unqualified to really think about strategic planning, especially when we have experts on campus who are really in this business of strategic planning. And Jeff Lowenstein helped greatly organize the retreat in May and get us focused on the 5 groups that are listed there. We left that session in May and recognized that there were some critical things that we needed to evaluate, maybe not change, but at least evaluate them. Things like faculty membership, whether or not we should continue to have main research themes, whether or not our external reviews are really effective and doing anything for us, how would they operate if we were to get rid of main research themes. We know that with the ESCO project coming, we're going to have to do better at sharing lab space. Cancer Center is already very much thinking about shared lab space, and we all ought to be thinking much more about shared lab space. I'll tell you one of the greatest things that bothers me. So mostly I say there's nothing but, this job has nothing but great things associated with it. But there are things that do bother me. And when I walk through halls and labs and don't see them occupied or really fully utilized, it, especially over and over again, right, it really gets, it basically says, these are resources just are not being used well. And that's something we really can't have, and we have to change that. And one of the ways we can be more effective about using the space is to share that lab space. And Carol led a group that really addressed the question of how do we do this, how do we move into a more shared lab space model. I do think it's the future. You see it very effectively in other places. IGB has pockets of that where they really do well. We have pockets here as well. I think there are some groups that do operate in the mode of shared lab space. And then our greatest resource, I think, is our fellowships, both our graduate but especially our postdoc fellowships. It's a resource that the Beckman Foundation gives us every year. And I ask the question, are we putting that resource to the best use possible? Have they been fairly distributed? Have they been effective? And we've both looked at that question, as well as we've begun a retrospective analysis of how effective our postdocs have been, and we'll have something more to say about that, hopefully in time with Lizanne DeStefano, who's going to be doing that evaluation. So the process basically of strategic planning, I also opened up the first meeting that we had with our leadership group and said, I'm not really a big fan of strategic planning, but that's really because I don't think I've done it well or been involved in a situation where it's been done very well. And that's why we brought in Deepak Samoa from Geese Business School to help us out. And I have completely changed 180 degrees my opinion about is there value in this, and I really do think there is. Deepak began by looking at sort of this analysis and evaluation of the Beckman Institute, and I'll give you that in just a second. And then he's taken us through mission and values. And once again, what's the importance of that? It's because we need to be grounded in something. And we have to have sort of a code of conduct on which our decisions are based on. Every day there's decisions being made in the office about how resources are used. And it's really helpful to have something to base those decisions on. And Deepak schooled me in the value of that, having a set of core values. And from there, we really need to think about goals and aspirations. This is much more beginning to think about our scientific goals and aspirations, leading to a research portfolio, who we have and what we're doing, and then thinking about, are we using those resources, have set that research portfolio up successfully, and the whole process starts all over again. In case you don't know, here is in the Pentagon in the center, the leadership team that meets every other week and has provided input and value. And we have had this semester, I would say, some of the greatest discussions. I want to say thank you to everybody who is on that list and has committed their time, because it really has been a lot of time, but I think a lot of good has come out of it. It's been a lot of fun, actually. And I think people, at first I wasn't sure whether I'd get leadership to buy into this or not, but they really did come around, and the card that you have is a consequence of us thoughtfully thinking about Beckman as it exists today and Beckman going forward. The first thing the group did was assemble what will be the advisory committee. It's a blue ribbon group that has really tried to cover all aspects of what expertise we have and the areas of activity that we have going on here at Beckman. You'll probably recognize many names, some who are quite familiar with us. Paul Bone and Jennifer Lewis, obviously, are former faculty members here. They know us well from a sort of insider, now outsider perspective, and I thought that would be useful. Dennis Doherty is the director of the Caltech Beckman Institute, and so I think he'll have an interesting perspective. And then one other name I'll call out, Scott Strobel, is on the Beckman Foundation's Science Advisory Committee. And so he has he's at Yale, a professor, I think Scott's in chemistry, has I think a really interesting viewpoint. He's made a comment to me before like, yeah, there's this hardwired money that the foundation sends to the institutes, and there's not much. I don't even know why we're asked to read the reports, because the money's going to go no matter what. That was the quote from Scott. And I said, let me bring you here to Illinois and show you why that's money well spent. And so it's, hopefully that charge is going to pay off. And then 3 internal members who can give great perspective about the institutes. So Deepak began by looking at an analysis of, when I say external here, external analysis, it really means outside of Beckman Institute, not outside of the University of Illinois. Because what he wanted to do was bring in, and the second bullet point here, this retrospective opinions from people who know us and have commented on us, and I'll show you who those are in a second. But he began, first bullet point, by really thinking about this idea that what has happened, what's transpired in the last 30 years in the area of collaborative interdisciplinary institutes, and where is Beckman's role in that? And we all think we are very much early days, a part of that, and so he put that to the test and decided to get some data on that and ask the question, is that really the case or not? Where does Beckman stand? But in terms of, so I should have given you the description of how he went about collecting the information that he did. So first of all, he did, with a graduate student, some just research through the internet and whatever other means he could get a hold of, looking at our peer institutions. I'll show you the data very, very quickly, but we won't spend much time on it because the quantitative data suggests, yes, we were early days, but not the first. And then I think the more insightful information comes from this sort of retrospective opinions from our stakeholders. The stakeholders include many faces that you're familiar with through our leadership, and then Ann Holtgren, who's the director of the Beckman Foundation, and then Barry Bozeman, who is expert in interdisciplinary institutes. And so those are the people, and Deepak went and literally sat down with each one of the people, with the exception of Barry. He didn't fly to Arizona. He did interview him by phone. First, some quantitative numbers. We looked at our peer institutions and asked the question, how many collaborative interdisciplinary institutes do they have? It's hard to judge and hard to make comparisons just unless you go visit, which he did not do. But this is the data that he collected, and you can see, this incredible range and what does it mean. But if you plot sort of to the best he could find the starting point, so he found, I believe, about 3/4 of the institutes that were listed, their starting dates. And so you can see that there's this amazing uptick in interdisciplinary institutes beginning in the 1990s. And so for sure at the end of the 80s, when we opened the doors here 30 years ago, we're on the beginning of that uptick. But also not, we cannot claim that we're the first. And if you think about this campus, there's other things that had existed that were definitely interdisciplinary, the CSL, the MRL, and so we're even not the first here at the University of Illinois, but different in many ways, probably very much unique in the fact that that diversity that I showed in that pie chart, I think, is really what captures us best and most unique. So Deepak looked to see if there was a correlation between uptick in funding at universities when they started their institutes, and this was sort of aggregated across all of that data. And I think he found evidence, but it was weak, of some association between an increase in research funding and whether those universities were populated with interdisciplinary institutes. But the more interesting results of his analysis were these sort of comments that I've assembled into a collection. So these are not quotes from any of the people, but they are sort of a analysis summary of what he heard in his conversations. We're living in the heyday of the interdisciplinary institutes, and so that's one of the points. This immediately caused me to think about a comment that was made when we had our 2017 men's review. The comment was made that, Beckman really needs to be extremely concerned about drifting into its midlife crisis. And so the heyday and the midlife crisis, and it sort of sets me on fire every time I read that, but it wasn't quite the charge I got when I read this email from Deepak. Consistently, what we're hearing from stakeholders is that the Beckman model was great, and it needs to be reinvented to make it relevant to the world today. And he said something like, you need to show something unique and how to supercharge collaborations and come through with a revised mission. So with that in mind, and I went to the gym this morning, just like I do every other morning, at least 6 days a week. I heard, as I'm listening to my classic rock music, Neil Young comes on, and it's the song Hey Hey My, Into the Black. And it's off the album from 1979, Rust Never Sleeps. And so guess what? We are competing against Rust. And that's our challenge, right? And then a little Wikipedia search, and it's quite interesting because the title of the album, Rust Never Sleeps, is borrowed from Rust-Oleum paints, which those of us in AMS have a product that's marketed by Rust-Oleum. So yes, we're trying to make sure that Rust does sleep in our research, but I thought that was really cool because it speaks exactly to these comments that were being made about heyday and midlife crisis and the need to reinvent ourselves. Neil Young in 1979, obviously his career had gone through this roller coaster ride, and it was the title was really his self-renewal to avert the threat of irrelevancy. And so I think we And then the line from that song, it's better to burn out than it is to rust. And I couldn't agree more. Like, let's go out with a flash if we're going to go. And Kara's looking at me, is like, no, stop. Don't spend any more. So with that, the business that we took care of was thinking about that mission statement. And we tweaked it. We didn't change it dramatically because it's worked pretty well and it seems to be continuing to be suited for us. But we tried to give it a little more focus and purpose. Maybe you've seen the sign. I think it's been posted. Right, Doris? So, a better world through collaborative innovation. It's all about the C word. We've got to be collaborative. That is our hypothesis that, face-to-face interactions, physically, being physically present is important. And that's why the first line has these key words. Community of scholars, I think that's what we aspire to be here. The physical space, that's why we put that in our mission statement, because it's really the presence of being here physically. We today can collaborate, we certainly can collaborate remotely. Is it effective? Well, we think that the physical space is really critical to foster collaboration. And then we want to think back about bold and disruptive ideas. And as I was thinking about this morning, I don't think there has been anything more disruptive in the world in our lifetime than something that took place to some degree inside this building. Now, I did a little bit of homework, and Mosaic actually started in a garage somewhere in a building that I think doesn't exist anymore. But ultimately, when NCSA occupied the 5th floor, so that was 93. By 95, the last version of Mosaic was being distributed. And so some of that evolution of Mosaic, the most disruptive thing that ever took place in our lifetime, I think we can probably argue, happened in the walls of this building. And it's time to make another disruption. And so we want to be bold in our thinking, risk-taking, and inspirational to these kinds of disruptive ideas. And so that's the mission statement. A better world through collaborative innovation. And so it's, next time your neighbor asks you what goes on in the Beckman Institute, that's as good of an answer as you can give, as anything else I can think of. It's people coming together to collaborate, and it's pretty messy inside there. Think about that Venn diagram all mashed together. That's really what we are, but that's what makes us so exciting and dynamic and pivotable. The next thing we did is something we didn't have before, at least not to my knowledge, and that is this idea that there's a need to have core values. And I was like, what's that and why do we need it? A set of guiding principles. The idea is really, we do make decisions every day, how resources are used, and having something to base those decisions on, a code of conduct or however you'd like to describe it, was what Deepak described to us as why this is important. And so you can read them on your card, on the flip side of that card, and we'll go through them, because I think that they really, you really have to ask yourself, do the words on this card capture what can be used in making decisions? And I've definitely used them in thinking about making decisions, and actually have even reversed a decision on the basis of, gee, I don't see how this fits into the card. And so, it's really thinking about purposeful choices that are made consistently. It's thinking about something that is practical. We can use it for, just about everything, but it's practical. It recognizes that what we're trying to achieve is greater than our own individual success or discoveries. And really, it comes down to what is it that these decisions are all about. They're all about how we operate, how we assign space, how we allocate our resources. So excited, is the way you can remember this set of core values. Thanks to, I think it was Brad. Was that you that came up with that idea? So Brad, the MR, or just like NMR. I mean, it's just filled a area filled with acronyms. And so I guess in order to even be playing in that space, you have got to be good at coming up with acronyms. Excited was a natural, actually we had already drafted the core values, and I think Brad did a little rearrangement and a synonym word change, and there it was. But what's the real purpose of excited? Hopefully you can remember what the core values are. Excellence, we aim to do the best work in the field. We're devoted and employ cutting-edge methodologies and instruments and invest in state-of-the-art facilities. Collaboration, I think this is the most important one. We celebrate dedicated and supportive colleagues. The only way you're going to be effective collaborators is if you work with one another, and you have to, I think I'll give you the story. This was best communicated to me as the AMS group was taking off and doing really well, as my daughter was playing softball. And her coaches would frequently have meetings with the girls and instruct them on different things. You would think mostly it was about how to do something in softball better, but this was a great coach, and he basically said, look, you will be asked by a reporter about various aspects of the game. And there is a right way and a wrong way to respond. Remember, you're part of a team. My daughter was a pitcher. And he said, the reporter will come up to you and say, you pitched a great game. And then the coach said, but it shouldn't be like, yes, I agree with you. The right response is, I had an amazing defense, and my catcher really called an awesome game. That's why we were so effective. And then he went on to say, it's anytime there's anything negative, you are the one that takes the blame. And so, what happened in the third inning when they scored all those runs? I really lost my rhythm. I lost my strike zone got too narrow, and I just couldn't hit the marks. What's all that? She took the blame for everything that went wrong and reflected everything that went right. And when I heard that, I immediately thought to myself, oh, I can apply that every single day of how we work in AMS. And I truly have tried to do exactly that. And I think I taught and communicated at least that effectively to both our students and my colleagues. And that is the way we operated. And that is, I think, why we were so successful and hung together for the last 20-some years. So really that first statement is so much about what it means to be supportive of one another as you're collaborating, and reflecting the success and taking the failures onto yourself and reflecting the successes onto them. Integrity. I don't think that really needs to be explained, but it needs to be a core value, and it's certainly one of Arnold's. And if you don't have integrity, you might as well not have anything else, was a paraphrase of essentially what he said. Transdisciplinary research, obviously that is what we want to do. We want to bridge, blend, and create disciplines, and we want to be open-minded. You cannot come here and participate if you are not willing to really stretch yourself and reach out, and the only way you can do that is to be open-minded. We want to boldly explore what goes forward, put on the challenges with our greatest and biggest problems of the day, and really try to think differently and really come up with those disruptive changes. And we want to embrace a diversity of thought. I look at this and I say, really what Beckman is excellence through collaboration on principles of integrity, transdisciplinary research, bold exploration, and diversity of thought. And so, we think about, well, power collaborators. Are we really power collaborators? This is Jill, thank you for collecting this data. One way to look at it, it's one of many, and you'll find maybe your name up there, and part-timers are in orange, and blue is the full-time faculty. The number of collaborative publications, how long you've been at Beckman Institute. And collaborative publications don't define by itself what a power collaborator is, but it certainly should be considered in the parametric equation that would be scoring you on are you a power collaborator or not. This is only the period of 2014 to 2018, and it's only peer-reviewed articles. But you can see we're all over the map. Nancy Sotos is on top, part-timer, 77 from that 4-year period. Really remarkable amount of interactions in that group. The full-time leader, Gabby Popescu, is also really amazing. It's plotted against number of years at Beckman, because if you are here past 10 years, you better be more than just a person who's collaborating a lot and writing a lot of joint publications. You'd better be mentoring people to become leaders. And if you're here in the 5 to 10 year range, you ought to be leaders and establishing groups. And if you're a newcomer, you bringing your expertise and ideas and energy and really getting us excited about opportunities that are able to go forward with. And so if you do a hashtag on Power Collaborators, not every individual in this is us, but we own it, and let's make the most out of it. We really are the Power Collaborators. That is a Google image from half hour before I stepped into this room of hashtag Power Collaborators, and you will notice many faces that are there. Brad's there, Gabby's there. We have some of our Beckman postdoc fellows, and Vivash in the lower right-hand corner. That's when you gave that Power Collaborator Directors Seminar, so captured there with John Katzenellenbogen's face on the side. So numbers aren't everything. I'm into numbers because the data doesn't, numbers don't lie. You just have to interpret and what their meaning is. They were collected in some particular way, and they don't lie, so they are of value. But really, it's this idea that at every stage of our career, if you are a part of Beckman for the short or long term, you have a role to play, and that role will change as your career evolves. But if you're here for the long haul, it's got to be more than just I'm coming here doing my normal routine. I'm going to have to become a leader. Then I'm going to have to become a mentor of leaders. And that's how we're going to survive and go forward. And in the spring, I will meet with every full and part-time faculty member. And I won't be too hung up on the numbers. I'll have them. But what I really want to know is convince me that you're a power collaborator in however you would like to most convince me of that. All right, the next slides, I need to bring you back to some important information, and this is where this idea of grantsmanship begins, and how our future can look rosy and bright and really resourceful, or it can look like it's going to be a struggle, and it depends on you. We survive off of indirect costs to a certain degree, and maybe going forward more than ever. And if we're going to be successful, we really need to think about mindful grantsmanship and being aware of what it means when we submit or are part of a grant that's going forward. So thanks to Kara Johnson. She put the model together, and it really is important that we think about the business of research. Every other day you can spend thinking about research for the sake of research, but the business of research is something that we care a lot about because it is what's going to define our success going forward. So what you're looking at here is a plot of both our expenses and our budget. Our budget includes 3 components. This does not include the foundation's gift money, which is mostly used for things like new equipment acquisition and our postdoc fellows and our graduate fellows. It includes our State of Illinois general funds. And those are going down every year and probably will continue to go down until they can't go down any further unless they start taking money from us. Allocated ICR, which is a somewhat mysterious, comes from the VCR's office, and we get it every August. And then earned ICR, and that's the one that's variable, and that's the one that depends on you. As you can see, the budget is going down and our expenses are going up. These, by the way, are just expenses that are recurring, meaning costs of salaries and things like that. They go up because we all get cost of living increases, and our budget is going down largely because of our state funds are decreasing. You can see there's a crossover point coming in the not too distant future. It's shortly around the time that my term will be up. I don't want to hand over the directorship to the next director heading in the wrong direction. And so I've kind of taken this very seriously and say, oh, I got to turn this thing around. And how can we do it? And Kara has definitely showed that it's very possible. I want to leave you with a very optimistic picture going forward, that we have an amazing opportunity if we are all in at Beckman and really put our multidisciplinary multi-PI grants through the Beckman Institute. Because this is the way things look. If we would take those multidisciplinary grants that already exist on campus, that are part of our, that are really associated with our full-time and part-time faculty, not growing the dollars at all, just assuming those grants continue and we maintain steady state at what we are right now. But if they're properly proportioned according to what we see as a reasonable value proportion of percentage if you're full or part-time faculty. So let me explain what that means. And this one needs to be read because I don't want to screw it up. So in green, it's how is it that we could imagine this budget amazingly growing to a degree that is almost off the chart? It includes not only the state funds, the allocated ICR from the VCR, and also our earned ICR dollars that we are currently getting at the rate we're currently getting them, but it is projected ICR, or facilities and administrative costs, for a proportion of the multidisciplinary grant expenditures for our full and part-time faculty members that are currently being administered by other units on campus. I told you I was as guilty and maybe more guilty than anyone else. The specific example I'm thinking of is I had in 2008 or 9, maybe it was a little bit later than that, maybe it was 12, Dow Chemical, a Dow Chemical grant, $5 million. I ran it through the MRL. Didn't even think about it. It was like not on my mind. It was like I had 3 weeks to give put this grant together, and it was in the middle of the summer, and it wasn't exactly on my calendar that I was supposed to be doing this, and so I was mostly concerned about writing the proposal and a lot less concerned about where that grant is going to be going through. And Jennifer Lewis was a co-PI on it, and she was the MRL director at the time, and I just said, Jennifer, why don't you take care of the business part of it? I'll worry about getting the grant together. And I'm telling you, I screwed up big time. I mean, a lot of the work was done here. I mean, and that really is what it comes down to. If the work is done here, we need to, for good business sense, business of research sense, need to be sending those grants through our business office. And so to the staff at the Beckman Institute, we have to be the best business office on campus. And we want to be the business office where everybody wants to send their grants through. And if we don't do that, we face this very rocky road of great challenge where we enter the red zone, and we don't want to be there. So instead, we want to be able to do things that are really exciting. And so 80%, what are the right proportions? I didn't really explain what those are. We don't expect every single multidisciplinary, multi-PI grant to be run through the Beckman Institute. It's probably unrealistic. But if you are a full-time faculty member, 80% of the multidisciplinary, multi-PI grants that you're on, if they are run through the Beckman Institute, that's how that line gets generated, taking current grant dollars. And that number for full-time and part-time faculty is 50%. And so with those kinds of not unrealistic expectations, we will be in a world of opportunity with our resources. And for example, the reality is this. So I just showed you the recurring costs in terms of what our expenses were on the previous slide. But we're in a building that's 30 years old, and it has a lot of deferred maintenance, and it has needs like we need to replace the carpeting, and it has needs like some of you are enjoying wonderful new furniture, and et cetera, et cetera. It's the part of what we want to be going forward, to be able to have the flexibility where we can maintain a building like we want it to be maintained, and do things that we want to be able to do. So the special projects that are listed there are things like, the carpeting or remodeling. We're constantly changing it up. We want to be a dynamic place. The only way we can do that is with obviously having the kinds of funds that are available. We could do it this year, and we'll burn out really quickly. As Kara says, if you keep spending at the rate you're spending, we're not going to survive. And she's right. But the reality is, the building demands it. If we're going to maintain it like the Beckman Institute has been maintained, and like the Beckman Institute has continued to exist, and the opportunities to do the kinds of things we all want to do are there. And so it can be wonderful if we all collectively work together and pull our resources and are all in for Beckman, or it can be miserable, and we'll start cutting services and capabilities if we have to, so that I can hand over the directorship to the next director and say, we're not in the hole, so we're not running a deficit. So just a little bit about what is that fiscally stable future? Well, obviously we need to increase the revenue. And this is not the way we are going to increase it. We are not going to increase the revenue by increasing the total number of collaborative grant dollars. We can, that's great. If we do it, that's wonderful. But that's not really how that model was drawn. Because look at what we're doing already. I think the faculty here on campus are pulling their weight in terms of bringing in grant dollars. And this plot reflects that. We've bounced through a couple of ups and downs, but certainly things look very promising. And the number, 50-some million for 100 faculty, that's a reasonable expectation of what funding. And so the great news is we don't really need to grow the pie in order to be incredibly resourceful, having a great and vast resources. But what we do need to do, I think, is change the proportion of where those multidisciplinary grants to come closer to the targets of 80% for full-time and 50% for part-time. And so how are we doing? We're not doing well. 80% is what we target. Right now, 54% of our multidisciplinary grants that our full-time faculty members are bringing in, 54% of those grants are run through Beckman rather than the 80%, and that's why our budget line is way down relative to where it could be. Our part-timers need to pick it up too. So we are running 18% instead of 50% through the Beckman Institute. Other ways to grow the funds would be to try to go to campus and say, we need to really get our fair share. The work that's being done here isn't being paid for here, and we need to come up with a new model, and that's probably not a realistic way of going forward, especially when there's another way to solve the problem. We could come up with new sources of revenue. They may be to grow the endowment. That would be up to me, I think, to go out and fundraise, and that's perfectly a reasonable thing to ask of you, and I will do everything I can in that regard. Another thing, obviously, is we can think about, are there special services that we could offer? Two examples of some sort of continuing education and clinical imaging are possibilities that we've talked about before. I'll come back to those slides in just a minute because that may be where most of your questions are, if you have any. Just a couple of housekeeping items that I want to take care of before we get to question and answers. And the first one is, if you hadn't seen the video or didn't come to the presentation or didn't send a representative, make sure that you realize come this spring, April probably, is when we're going to get started with the ESCO project. And for those of you who have lab space here, it will be disruptive, like the carpeting project was disruptive, but hopefully in a good way. Maybe it will teach us forced teaching of how to share lab space more effectively. The details are here. These slides will be up and posted. If you need to, you can go read them. Finally, we are obligated by the state to do an inventory and we are behind, and we need your help on both of these items, ESCO and the inventory, in order to take care of business. And, like it or not, it's reality, and so please help us out. We really do need your help. That's all I have. Happy holiday party. Don't forget it. It's right afterwards. I think my granddaughter's going to show up, so I'm excited about that. And I'll stop there and ask if anybody has any questions. Gabrielle, I think I saw your hand up.
When you are, with respect to the indirect cost return, you are, the projection there is based on already existing grants or on grants that we might get in the next
No.
3-4 years?
No, these are.
Go down 4 or 5 years, we probably start a lot of new grants.
Kara can comment on this further, but it does not imagine. It takes our current grant level and basically says it will stay steady state. You can exactly answer specifically how that was, what that really means.
But that's really it. Is it our current grant level? There we go. It's current grant level. So what we do is we pull all the grant expenditures by our full and part-time faculty members. We weed out which ones are single PI or single disciplinary, and then we look at the multidisciplinary grants. So that represents all of the current multidisciplinary expenditures, not just awards, but the expenditures for the year, and then we do the calculations of 80 and 50% on those.
Yeah, but when you do the fiscal year 2022 and fiscal year 2023, the numbers there are projected on what?
It's projected on current state. It's just holding it steady into the future, because we don't know.
It's assuming that if, whatever we've been hitting, whatever millions of dollars we've been hitting, right?
It was 56 million.
So
in
it takes the number that we're, currently getting for the full and part-time faculty and saying we'll maintain 56 million.
Just a clarifying question, people may not be sure about this. So when we say multi-PI, multidisciplinary, what we mean is multiple investigators from different departments, different home departments.
Yeah.
So 2 people in psychology at Beckman write a grant, we get 0. 2 people from ECE write a grant, we get 0. Having people across the actual department boundaries is what will have Beckman get some of the ICR back from the central campus.
This is why it's, comes back to us, right? It's all about where we are, aware, because if we're not aware, we may not even think twice about it. That's my excuse. But once we are aware, then we have to think about, and if we're on a team that is spread out all over campus, a good thing to do is come talk to us. If you're doing a thing with IGB or MRL or some MNTL or whatever, and it's clearly going to qualify as multi-PI, multidisciplinary, it would be best to come talk to us. I think we at least should be brought into the conversation.
Specify a little bit, just to be sure what multidisciplinary means. Could it be different fields within the same department?
Yes.
Different
So no,
fields?
the answer is that's an excellent question. It's sort of what Patty was getting to, but the answer is no. That our university does not consider multidisciplinary as qualifying if you are collaborating with someone in your own department. It could be like psychology. How could that be? You are all over the map.
I'm doing imaging and I'm collaborating with someone who's a clinical psychologist.
I get it.
That does not qualify. Even all imaging is happening here, 90% of the research is here.
It does not qualify according to the university OVCR policies.
It's the provost.
Provost.
And so Diane brought up a good point of, so the model is where the work is being done, right? And so the 80%, so if you look at the provost communication, it's if 80% of the work is done in the institute, that's when Beckman should administer the award. The 80% that we're talking about, the 80-50% split, is not something that we just came up with. It was percentages that the faculty leadership, the theme leaders, originally what it was, had told us 80% of the work for full-time is done within the Institute and 50% for part-time, and that's where we got those figures.
I wanted to clarify, so the 80% rule for putting grants through here, that has to be plus interdisciplinary, or could, if 80% or 100% of the work is done here, and it's multiple people from the same department, can it go through the Beckman? 100%? Or even 80%? I mean, yeah, so I just want to clarify what the rule is.
So the provost communication basically says that it should be multidisciplinary and fit the rule to go through the Institute. We do make exceptions to that rule, though.
But if you put a single investigator grant through the Beckman office, we're doing the work, the business work, and we see no F&A on that. So it might be convenient for you to put the grant here, and we do that occasionally, but it's just more work for us. We don't get anything out of it. Even though the work may be done here, right? I mean, many of you full-time faculty, if you have a single investigator grant, whether you put it through here or put it through your home institution, we're not getting any of that F&A. One point of clarification, and this is extremely important, and I should have made a bigger point about it. Your home units do not suffer in any way, regardless of where that grant is run through. If you run the grant through the Beckman Institute, they will capture 45% of the F&A. If you run that grant through the home unit, they will recover 45% of the F&A. It does not matter to the home unit. There's no competition between your home unit and Beckman. They will be able to claim, and their budget line will show the same bottom line regardless of where that grant runs through.
I would like to remind
Diane, it's actually maybe a really important point.
It's still unclear what the rules are. If it's an and or an or, you would have to be multidisciplinary and 80%.
And the rule is thank you for asking this question. I really want to get this. It's this awareness point that I really want to get across. And is the answer. You must be multidisciplinary, which is defined as outside of your home unit, and you must be multi-PI.
And the work happens here,
And the work is done here.
mostly here.
I think we need to agitate for a change in definition, especially for some departments. My department is comparative biosciences. There's no one else in the department that's even in my field. Everyone that I collaborate with in my department, it's a multidisciplinary collaboration. And it may be more extreme than with someone I would meet in the hallway in Beckman. So to have that kind of narrow definition, thinking back to those silos that we used to have, I mean, even departments aren't that narrow anymore.
I couldn't agree with you more, Sue.
So can we agitate for a change? I mean, presumably we're moving ahead and we're changing our mission and everything. Hopefully the definition of some of these things could change so that it's a more sustainable mechanism going forward.
It's a conversation that, I think here's how we can get a collective force. The institute directors, all 8 institute directors, meet fairly regularly. And what we need to do is team together and take it to Andreas, who's apparently, it's the provost that policy, right, that we need to try to change.
I I wanted to remind everybody before we leave that next year is Beckman's 30th anniversary. We have now, as of yesterday, selected the dates for our October signature event, which will be October 2, 3, and 4. So in addition to the open house in March and our usual Arnold Beckman celebration on April 10th, we're going to have a series of events in October, and we look forward to having everybody help us plan what we want to do. So we're thinking about cool celebrities and games and all kinds of fun stuff to have it be a really great celebration and really involve the larger community as well.
All right, let's go enjoy our holiday party. Thanks.